Antonio Vivaldi's Spring has more than twice as many film credits as any of its counterparts in his Baroque masterpiece, The Four Seasons. Spring is weddings and day spas, your toddler's I.Q inflating sleep aid. Spring is the sassy classical of the baby boomers, music to accompany an anniversary toast at an expensive French restaurant. But, as my fellow millennials know far too well, an ill-timed frost nips yesteryear's aspirations in the bud. Now is the time for winter, a composition that, like the season, holds us in a tighter grip. I first heard Winter in 1985, when I was 4. A snow-laced mountain fog had settled over the Potomac Highlands of West Virginia. I sat alone in the living room, watching a cartoon movie called Sarah and the Squirrel. It was not the light-hearted fare suggested by its title. Sarah's village is invaded by Nazis, and her family members are captured and taken to a concentration camp. She escapes the slaughter by hiding in a nearby forest. It is under these circumstances of genocide, starvation, and exposure to the elements that she befriends, or perhaps hallucinates, a squirrel. In the cartoon's final frames, Sarah wanders alone and barefoot through the snow. All of these events are set to Vivaldi's Winter. From there, it took the usual route of earworms. Having heard the music, I was desperate to hear it again. Better yet, I wanted to learn to play it myself. I asked my parents for a violin for my 5th birthday. When no violin arrived, I asked for a violin for Christmas. Then again for my 6th birthday. 7th. There were no violin teachers in our part of West Virginia, my parents explained. Not even Santa could fix this problem. Eventually the VHS of Sarah and the Squirrel disappeared from the video rental store's shelves. Yet and to this day I can't quite explain why Winter remained in my head. Before I fell asleep each night, I mentally played the few notes I could remember. These sounds felt to me like a crucial directional aid, an encrypted message on a map of my future, an aural Polaris. In retrospect, the darkness of winter conveyed something I could not articulate as a child, namely, the peculiar sadness of Appalachia, the isolation, and the poverty. Many of my elementary school classmates faced challenges like Sarah's: cold, hunger and abuse. In winter's ominous chords, I heard validation. The world was harsher than suggested by the cheerful, Disney-fied kid culture of the 1980s. The wild arpeggios of the violin sounded like an unspoken truth: some good little children die in the snow. After years of my begging for a violin, my parents agreed to drive me to Virginia for lessons, a weekly journey that required scaling at least a half-dozen wheel-spinning, stomach-churning, ear-popping mountains on the West Virginia State Highway system. 18-wheelers filled with coal or live chickens gasped up the mountains and zoomed down, sometimes losing control of their brakes. The entire trip back and forth took anywhere from 5 to 8 hours, and that's if there wasn't a freak mountain blizzard. 10 years of lessons later, my violin skills won me college acceptances and scholarships. I decamped to New York City, where I planned to study music. Even then I knew that my talent fell short of the mastery required for a real performing career, and I didn't last long as a music major. But the sadness of my failure was mitigated by the promise of other passions. Winter had surpassed itself, leading me toward a life that I never would have had were it not for this random VHS rental. And it has taught me how to let go. Except for the occasional wedding of a friend or family member, my violin lies dormant in a dusty case underneath the desk where I write. Despite a lifetime of wanting to, I have never been able to play winter, it comes too fast, in too challenging a key. The finger-tangling high notes in the first movement require a dexterity in F minor that I was never fully able to achieve. For now, I am content to listen to recordings while silently following the sheet music, my fingers twitching involuntarily like the post-mortem spasms of a cadaver. But there may come a time when I will try to play winter again. Because, however grim Vivaldi's masterpiece can be, it is not fully absent of hope. His score for the Four Seasons includes sonnets meant to explicate motifs within the music itself. A dog mentioned in the Spring Sonnet, for example, is represented by a barking sound made on the viola's lower strings. Of all these corresponding sonnets, Winter is the most carnal. Finger-trembling trills on the violin's thin, high-pitched E string emulate shivering and teeth chattering. The violin solo runs up and down the ebony fingerboard, conjuring the feeling of feet slipping on thin ice, bodies crashing into snowy embankments. But there is also comfort, the warmth of the hearth fire, tranquil and legato on the bow, lazy days punctuated only by the pizzicato of ice droplets on the roof. It is difficult music for a difficult season, times that are bound to be more challenging than we allow ourselves to imagine. But we need not wait for spring, nor spring, to find joy. The companion sonnet ends on these lines: "This is winter, which nonetheless brings its own delights."